Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something pretty big, the next democracy.
That's right.
If you're looking to really get your head around a potentially game-changing idea and do it efficiently, well, you're in the right place. We've gone through the source material, building the next democracy, looked at how it might fit or not fit with current system.
And the arguments against big structural changes, too.
Exactly. Plus, the nuts and bolts of securing the vote afterwards.
Yeah, the security aspects are fascinating.
Our goal today is simple. Pull out the crucial insights for you, focusing especially on how this kind of system might actually strengthen the security, the staying power of democracies.
Exactly. Because this isn't just, some academic exercise floating out there.
Right.
The sources suggest it's a tangible way to maybe tackle some core vulnerabilities democracies face now. Things like trust, accountability.
And just being able to adapt and survive, really.
Precisely. In a world that's, pretty turbulent.
Okay, so let's unpack it. In a nutshell, what is the next democracy? What's the core proposal?
Fundamentally, it envisions moving towards more continuous and more direct citizen participation.
Continuous.
Yeah, instead of just voting every few years, imagine having rolling 30-day digital voting windows on pretty much any public issue.
Wow, okay, 30 days on everything. That sounds intense.
Well, maybe not everything simultaneously, but the potential is there for ongoing input. But it's not just direct voting. The clever part is its flexibility.
That's so.
Citizens can vote directly, sure, if they want to, but they also have this option called liquid delegation.
Liquid delegation. Okay, what's that?
Think of it like temporarily lending your vote on a specific topic to someone you trust, maybe an expert in that field, or just someone whose judgment you value.
And you can take it back.
Instantly, anytime. Yeah. You can reclaim your vote or delegate it to someone else.
Okay, now that's interesting. That feels like a genuine shift.
It is.
It's not just voting for a representative and, hoping they do what you want for the next 4 years.
Right.
You can really fine-tune who represents your view on, say, environmental policy versus economic policy.
Exactly. And if your chosen proxy, your delegate, starts voting in ways you don't agree with,
you just pull your delegation.
Precisely. And this all happens out in the open. Proxies have to publicly register, state their stances. It builds in accountability.
Because if they make a bad call or seem compromised,
their support could vanish. That threat of immediate undelegation is a pretty strong check against, corruption or just not representing your delegators properly.
Right, that makes sense. Now, one source mentioned something called a constituent covenant. How does that fit in?
Yes, that's kind of the proposed bridge to our current system.
A bridge.
Yeah, the idea is that elected officials could voluntarily sign this covenant. By doing so, they pledge to vote in line with the majority preference shown by their active voters within this next democracy layer.
So it works alongside the existing government.
That's the key point. It's pitched as a parallel civic layer. It's not necessarily about ripping up constitutions on day one.
Okay.
It's about adding a direct, real-time channel for citizen views that officials can formally commit to following.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine a city council member signs this covenant. There's a vote on, say, funding a new library. Within this system, a clear majority of their constituents who are actively participating vote yes. The covenant would then compel that council member to vote yes officially, even if they personally weren't sure. It creates a much tighter link, issue by issue.
Okay, continuous voting, flexible delegation, a way for officials to link in. But how do we trust it all? What about transparency and accountability? Those are huge issues for trust in democracy.
Absolutely vital. And the design seems to really focus on that. It aims for radical transparency.
Radical? How so?
Well, your individual vote remains private, obviously.
Yeah.
Anonymity is protected.
Okay, that's crucial.
But the records of how votes were cast in aggregate, how delegation shifted over time, that's all audible in real time.
So like a public ledger?
Kind of, yeah. Imagine a publicly viewable record that tracks the flow of support on any issue. It's not just about catching fraud after the fact.
It's preventative.
It aims to be. It fosters a culture where, hidden agendas or backroom deals become much harder because the potential for shifts in support in delegations is visible. Think about lobbyists.
Their influence might be harder to hide.
That's the idea. When shifts in delegated votes can be seen, secret influence gets tougher.
So I can't see who voted for what, but I can see the totals, the trends, the delegation movements, all tracked publicly and traceably.
That's the concept. And to really nail down the integrity, every single voting action generates an immutable cryptographic receipt.
Immutable, meaning it can't be changed.
Exactly. Like a digital wax seal that's impossible to forge or break without everyone knowing. Any attempt to tamper with the vote count would leave detectable traces.
That sounds like a significant step up for election integrity, potentially. What else is built in for accountability?
Well, the proposal includes a ban on paid political ads.
A ban. Really?
Yeah. The thinking is to level the playing field, make it more about the strength of the arguments, less about who has the deepest pockets for advertising.
Interesting.
And any communication from organized groups, like interest groups or lobbies, would have to include machine-readable metadata.
Meaning?
Details on who funded it, how widely it was distributed, who it was targeted at, all open for scrutiny, bringing that hidden influence out into the sunlight.
So trying to reduce the power of dark money and hidden persuasion.
That seems to be the goal. Plus, the system incorporates things called deliberation anchors.
Okay.
Think public forums, maybe online, maybe small local microtown halls, where the arguments for and against different policies are laid out transparently.
So everyone can see the reasoning.
Yes, exactly. Makes it harder for deals to be struck behind closed doors when the public discussion and rationale are open. And finally, the whole system is based on open data.
Meaning the code itself?
The code, the data sets generated, results from any pilots, all public. So academics, watchdog groups, anyone can audit it constantly, check its integrity.
Okay, they seem to have put a lot of thought into plugging the leaks where trust can drain out of the system. Now, the really critical piece today, security. Actual voting security. Hacking, manipulation. How does the next democracy plan to stop that?
Yeah, that's absolutely paramount in the design. It aims for what's called end-to-end verifiable voting.
End-to-end verifiable, E2EV. We hear that term.
Right. It uses cryptographic proofs at every step. Basically ensure your ballot is counted correctly, kept private, and done so immutably.
But what about the digital divide? Not everyone has secure tech access.
Good point. The proposal addresses that with hardware-backed tokens, physical devices.
Like a little security key?
Sort of, yeah. You'd get them from designated public places, libraries, post offices, that sort of thing. They provide stronger authentication than just software, protecting against certain hacks and phishing.
Okay, so physical tokens for access. And after the voting period closes, what are the security checks then?
They're pretty comprehensive. One source really detailed this. You have that persistent, immutable public ledger we talked about.
Right.
Voters can use their receipt to check that their vote was included in the final tally, but crucially, without revealing how they voted.
So you can verify inclusion, but not reveal your choice.
Exactly. Preserves anonymity. The ballots themselves are strongly encrypted. The system's designed for anonymity from the ground up. Those hardware tokens, they only authenticate. They don't permanently link back to you.
Okay.
And there's a clever bit, delayed receipt delivery.
Why delay the receipt?
It's an anti-coercion measure. It stops someone from demanding you prove right now how you voted. If the receipt comes later, that immediate pressure point is removed.
That makes sense. Prevents that vote this way, now show me scenario.
Precisely. And perhaps the biggest security advantage is the proposal for the whole system to be open source.
Meaning anyone can inspect the code.
Anyone. A global community of developers, security researchers, academics, constantly scrutinizing it, looking for flaws.
So sunlight is the best disinfectant applied to the voting code itself.
That's the philosophy. You could even have public bug bounties, rewards for finding and reporting weaknesses.
Okay, so it's clear this isn't just about voting more often. It's a deep redesign aiming for a much more secure, much more trustworthy process. Let's circle back to our main focus. How does all this tech, all these procedures, actually boost the security and the staying power of democracies long term?
Right. Well, let's start with trust. It's the bedrock, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In many places, there's this growing disconnect. People feel government isn't listening, isn't responsive, that vote and vanish feeling.
Where you vote and then feel powerless until the next election.
Exactly. That erodes trust. So by offering continuous ways to engage and making the whole process radically transparent,
you potentially rebuild that trust.
that's the hope. When people see their input having a direct effect, when they can verify the process is fair, it strengthens their belief in the system's legitimacy. And legitimacy is fundamental to stability, to staying power.
It changes the citizen's role from just watching to actively participating. That feels inherently stronger.
It does. Empowering voters this way could also lead to, Well, more informed debates and maybe better decisions overall.
And that liquid delegation thing, does that help with stability?
It could. It addresses that expertise gap you often get with complex policy.
Right, none of us can be experts on everything.
But we can choose to delegate our voice on, say, nuclear energy policy to a physicist whose judgment we trust while keeping our direct vote on education. It maintains democratic legitimacy because the power to delegate and undelegate always stays with the individual while potentially improving policy quality.
And what about speed?
Yeah.
You mentioned the 30-day cycles. In a world changing so fast.
That agility could be crucial. Traditional lawmaking can be incredibly slow, sometimes dangerously slow in a crisis.
Yeah.
A system allowing for quicker policy adjustments based on real-time citizen input and data could make a democracy far more resilient, more adaptable.
Able to respond effectively before things spiral.
Potentially. And don't forget those built-in features like anti-polarization fire breaks.
What are those again?
Things like delaying the final vote tally slightly or using AI to curate counter-arguments alongside proposals. The aim is to encourage more thoughtful, less purely reactive decisions.
Which could reduce that knee-jerk polarization that feels so destabilizing right now.
Exactly, promoting stability through more considered deliberation.
Okay, but let's get specific about security threats. Corruption from within, interference from outside. How does the next democracy tackle those head-on?
Well, the transparency is a huge factor against corruption. As one source put it, it forces corruption out of the shadows. When political funding sources have to be clearer, when influence attempts are more visible, when officials using a constituent covenant know their votes are directly tied to real-time constituent views.
The incentives change.
Right. The risk of getting caught goes way up, and the opportunities for hidden deals go down. That tackles a major source of internal weakness and public cynicism that can really undermine a democracy.
So it's hardening the system against internal rot, not just external attacks.
Precisely. And then there's the citizen empowerment angle. When people feel they have a real, continuous voice and they trust the voting process is secure and verifiable.
They feel more ownership.
Exactly. That can combat the apathy and disenfranchisement that make societies vulnerable. Vulnerable to manipulation, to misinformation, whether it's coming from inside or outside.
People are more likely to defend a system they feel part of.
Absolutely. And the technical security itself, the cryptography, the open source verification, the public audits, builds resilience against direct interference. It makes the democratic process itself a harder target to hack or manipulate.
It sounds like the core idea is that a democracy that's more transparent, more accountable, and more engaging isn't just, nicer, it's fundamentally stronger, more secure.
I think that's a key takeaway. If citizens feel heard, trust the process, see the outcomes as legitimate, they're less likely to be swayed by destabilizing forces or lose faith entirely.
Which is critical for long-term survival.
Definitely. By making the system more responsive and more trustworthy, the next democracy aims to strengthen that vital bond between citizens and government. That bond is ultimately the best defense any democracy has.
And being able to adapt policy faster, more inclusively, that helps weather storms.
It boosts that long-term staying power, yes. The capacity to effectively meet challenges.
Okay. So wrapping this up, the next democracy isn't just a tweak to voting. It's really proposing a fundamental shift.
It really is. Towards something far more transparent, much more accountable, and deeply participatory.
With potentially huge implications for democratic security and endurance.
Exactly. All those mechanisms we talked about, the continuous loading, liquid delegation, the radical transparency, the robust security, they all point towards trying to fix core vulnerabilities and, crucially, bolster democracy's resilience for the future.
A future that looks pretty complex. So we'll leave you, our listener, with this to think about. Imagine a system where your voice could genuinely be heard continuously, where every decision was open to rigorous scrutiny. How might that fundamentally change the relationship you have with your government? And what could that mean for the security, the endurance of democracy itself in facing the challenges ahead? Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.